Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. Okay. So I had a person ask if we could talk about what's going on in Israel, and so I want to start by going to Matthew. So let's start with Matthew 24, I believe it is. This is one I hadn't written down, where it talks about the list of things that happen near the end. Maybe it's Matthew 25. Matthew 25:31.
That's the last chunk.
Yes. No, it's where he asks about the sign of the times. I think it's 24. Where they ask what are the signs of your coming?
Cause yeah, what I was saying, that's like when he's actually coming, so.
Yeah. And there have been wars and rumors of world wars.
Well, you can join us on this side, we're just starting Sunday school a little early, cause we
But
can't.
we'll go ahead and read Matthew 24. Starting with, it's most of the chapter. Let's just go ahead and read the entire chapter. I'll just read it. And Jesus went out and departed from the temple, and his disciples came to him to show him the buildings of the temple. And Jesus said unto them, See ye not all these things? Verily I say unto you, there shall not be left here one stone upon another that shall not be thrown down. And as he sat upon the Mount of Olives, the disciples came unto him privately, saying, Tell us, when shall these things be, and what shall be the sign of thy coming, and of the end of the world? And Jesus answered and said unto them, Take heed that no man deceive you. For many shall come in my name, saying, I am Christ, and shall deceive many. And ye shall hear of wars and rumors of wars. See that ye not be troubled, for all these things must come to pass, but the end is not yet. For nation shall rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom, and there shall be famine, and pestilences, and earthquakes in diverse places. All these are the beginning of sorrows. We're going to go ahead and stop right there, because there's a lot in that list that I kind of want to go through each one and just discuss some of the things that have happened through the years that fall under these categories. So the first thing is, for many shall come in my name, saying, I am Christ, and shall deceive many. Is there anything that you can think of that has happened, where this has happened?
Well, the entire Roman Catholic Church is based on that. They say, I'm here in the stead of the Father, and call me Father.
Right.
So that's a whole organization that is personifying that.
Yes, that's a great example.
But it does say many will come, and I think that's covering a lot of other congregations as well.
Yes.
Besides just the Catholicism.
Mhm. I agree, and there have been people through the years that have started cults calling, I'm the Messiah. Charles Manson is one of them. Many since then that have gone down that road.
And that Jesus will come in 1914.
What?
And the proclamation that Jesus was gonna come in 1914.
Oh yeah, that's happened through the years too.
Yeah, different.
And then when it comes and he's not here, well then they push it out to a different date.
And these continue to pop up. New people.
Oh,
come
yeah, all the time.
And say they're the Messiah. And all of
Yes. Okay, so the next one is kind of where we're gonna focus today. You shall hear of wars and rumors of wars constantly. All the time. We don't even hear of so many of the conflicts that are happening around the world. I feel like through the years, we haven't really heard about things that are happening in Africa, where they're ethnic cleansing. We don't really,
Oh, yeah. South Africa is.
yeah, they don't really focus on that in the news. They focus on all these other areas, but we don't hear a lot about Africa, and that's a place of great unrest.
Well, we don't have that well-rounded news here, but like the BBC is a little bit better. We still don't hear about everything, but it is important to be
yeah, we need to be paying attention to this stuff. And of course, most recently, the attack of Hamas on Israel, and the atrocities that are happening over there. We know that Israel is a hot spot, and that's where, when I see something happening in Israel, I'm like, is this it? Is Jesus gonna come now? Because I'm ready. I am so ready. Yeah. Russell says not yet. There's a couple other things that are gonna happen first. But I kind of get excited because I'm like, I'm so ready. Let's do it. Let's do it. For nation shall rise against nation, kingdom against kingdom. It's happening constantly. Famines. There shall be famines. We hear that through the years. Different famines in different areas. Even in this country, we have droughts happening all the time. And that affects the world's food supply, which also affects whether people in Africa can eat in different places. We haven't really seen a huge food shortage here, but back in the Depression, there was a big food shortage, and so it happens here too. So we have to be aware of that and be ready. Pestilences.
We do see a lot of that potentially coming. I know a lot of people don't think that global climate change, I'm not going to say global warming because that's not really the right thing to call it, but global climate change is a thing. It is scientific, and it does impact a lot of these things.
Yes, it does. And pestilences.
Even that one.
Yeah, that's affected by it too.
Does pestilences also mean like disease? It does, right?
I think so. I think of like locusts coming and eating your crop, but
Yeah.
it's other things too.
Well, and I just want to mention this because I just read this article, and again, it was in relation to global climate change. But also, we just all went through a pandemic, and they call the next big disease, because they said it's not when another pandemic will happen, it's not if, but it's when. And they call it disease X, because they don't know what it is yet, obviously. But there was an article that I read this morning that in Siberia, for example, and any polar ice caps, any area that's frozen all the time, they're starting to have warmer periods of time, and there are a lot of diseases
Dormant.
that have been dormant for thousands of years.
They
And
learned that's covered one actually from the ice cores that they estimate from the Arctic and Antarctica as well. They found that microbes that they can tell used to be very dangerous because of disease of some sort.
Yes.
And they're using that to try to learn history and, possibly come up with antidotes and whatever else. But in order to do that, they have to reconstitute it.
Yes.
Which is, we saw that
Scary.
in China. What was that land?
Wuhan.
Yeah.
And they're doing that same sort of stuff in Siberia and probably all over. But
Yeah,
to
they're
your
finding-
point, they have to rehydrate it,
Yep.
and then it's a viable issue,
Yeah.
and they don't know anything about it. So
Right.
that's
And
hand
it's
in
gonna
hand.
sweep the globe just like COVID did. And it could be 10 times worse. I think they found smallpox or something like that. It was something like that they found.
That's actually becoming an issue, I guess. Cropping up in just the US.
Small.
Yeah,
Smallpox, yeah. Some people diagnosed with that.
Yeah, the
It's
problem
under
is-
control, but it's, because everybody's got.
For now.
But yeah.
yeah. And with these labs that hold these diseases, we have one in Ames.
Yeah.
They have all sorts of horrible diseases there. So it becomes a target for terrorist organizations, and that's really scary.
And I don't know, I'm sure everybody ever heard of it too, but when, going back to the wars, rumors of wars, as soon as Hamas hit, it was, Hezbollah came to the north and started attacking Israel as well.
Yes, I heard that too.
Yeah.
Yep.
So they're prepping on all sides pretty much.
Yep, so keep watching the news. I got a text from Mom. I hadn't been watching the news forever because I've been so busy. So Mom texts me about Israel, and you need to watch what's going on, and I can't remember what all you said, but I was like, oh, what's going on?
Well, I mentioned it
She did the
last
same
Sunday.
thing.
What?
She did the same thing to me. I'm
Yeah.
like, I don't know what's going on. And so I'm like, oh, I don't know if I want to know what's going on.
Right.
Well, I mentioned it last Sunday, but it just happened, and I had seen a blip on Facebook or something, but I didn't really. I'm like, is something happening? But hadn't really seen it yet, and now.
What's really scary about it is the protests that are taking place around the world against Israel.
See, that's the thing.
And-
Everybody's going to turn against Israel
Yeah.
at
And I
some
know-
point.
I know our government right now, we're allies with them, but I was looking at the possibility of future candidates. And there's one that sticks out that's very popular with a younger generation. I have no idea how to pronounce his name.
Oh,
Is it the V guy?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But he does not want to be allies with Israel at all. If he ever saw a term in office, he would cut ties with Israel altogether, which could be,
that could be
who
be,
knows, but
Yeah.
keeping an eye on that kind of stuff, just to
mhm.
be aware.
Right, be aware, not be scared of it or anything.
Yeah.
We know it's going to happen. We need to be prepared, which we get, I know this is totally off the subject, we get cases of split peas. So being prepared food wise is
Go to
a thing
Tasha's.
too. You can just come to my house, we'll have split pea soup
And peanut
during
butter
the, during the end times.
And orzo.
And peanut butter.
And orzo also.
Orzo, yes. We'll make a casserole. Oh, anyway, but yeah, being prepared, not just emotionally, like I'm ready for Jesus to come. You can prepare yourself, not like you don't need to go overboard and like stockpile everything, but having some stuff on hand, because you don't know what's going to happen. The electricity could go out and you need to have access to food or something like that. It's good to be prepared on
And
all
God,
fronts.
God will provide for us, but He also gives us the brains to help us prepare for ourselves.
Exactly.
It's
yes.
not.
Yes, that doesn't mean we don't plan. Moving on, Erica, we're in Matthew 24. We're going kind of step by step. We'll focus a little bit more on Israel a little bit later, but we're going through the list in Matthew 24. We just talked about pestilences. And that's something that we read about, like in Little House on the Prairie books, where the locusts would come and completely devastate all crops. Things like that happen today still, and we've heard about that recently.
Well, I've got pictures taken in the 30s where the hail hit the corn and there's just stubs sticking out.
Yeah, they eat everything in their path. And so those things are still happening today. And we're seeing more extreme weather, more extreme like winters and flooding and things like that, where 2 years worth of rain will fall in a matter of hours and flood the subways in New York and things like that. And so those things are mentioned here. Earthquakes in diverse places. We talk about earthquakes. Not just naturally occurring earthquakes. Earthquakes can come about in other ways too, like fracking.
I was just
When they
thinking
do
that.
that causes earthquakes. Taylor Swift concert in Seattle created.
I didn't even know that.
Yeah, I read about that. I was like, wow. It registered on the Richter scale
Oh my gosh.
because of
So many people.
so many people
Small
and
location.
and you're like to the same beat, and that goes back kind of to it reminds me of Jericho and how the troops marched around for days and days, and as they marched on the soil, it created vibrations in the wall, and once something like that
frequency that made
doing it at the same marching at that same tempo created a frequency that would cause the wall to vibrate, and it gets into a point of continual vibration until the point where it falls. And that's like the bridge out in Tacoma years ago.
Yeah.
You've probably seen the videos where the wind was causing those frequencies, causing it to vibrate, and eventually the entire bridge came down because of that. So vibrations, that's another way that's a way that terrorists can attack. It's crazy. I read a quote from Tesla from a long time ago, and he said that if you create the right frequency and it was strong enough, you can take down buildings, and you can
kill people.
You can kill
with
people
that.
with that too, because we will vibrate at a certain frequency as well. So that's another whole area of terror,
Yeah.
or can be. And that's really scary too, because you don't see it coming. It just happens. There's no warning signs. All of these are the beginning of sorrows. Most recently, I think the biggest earthquake we saw was over in, was it India or Pakistan? It killed thousands of people.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
But it seems like earthquakes are
They've had
happening.
some really, really bad ones, like Turkey and
Yeah.
Syria had very large ones.
Yeah.
One right after the other, actually, I
they're getting more frequent and more intense. And I wonder if some of that has to do with something we're doing, like if fracking and things like that, where we're disturbing the Earth's crust and causing it to change. So it's not necessarily just something that would happen naturally. It's something that we might have a hand in as well. Verse 8, all these are the beginning of sorrows. And I think that's as far as we went. Let's jump down to verse 11. It talks about, and many false prophets shall rise and shall deceive many. And we've talked about that a little bit already. That seems to be a continual thing that keeps happening. And because iniquity shall abound, the love of many shall wax cold. And we see this, the love of many waxing cold, where you see so many examples of abuse and
Well, on a
He-
large scale, the war that's happening.
the war that's happening, yeah.
But you're right, it can be to the micro in a home too.
Yeah, it just seems to be happening more and more, and we see more and more children in broken homes and dealing with parents that don't love them, and we're bringing up a whole generation of kids who are broken, and we're going to see some major problems in the next 10 to 20 years as they're entering the workforce. Because not only is that happening, the screen time that kids have these days is affecting their brain development, and it affects their emotional intelligence and their ability their compassion, their ability to feel emotion.
And social media, it's not always a part of screen time, but it is a definite, that affects mental health.
Oh, mental health, yes. And that's something that I really appreciated last weekend, where we really focused on emotional well-being. Because without that, nothing else matters. If you are not emotionally well, you can't function properly. And we need to talk about when we're going to present that information, because it is really important information, not just for women, but everybody. It was a really good weekend, so I'm glad that I went. I hope you were glad you went too. And I know Megan was happy she was there as well. So I want to focus a little bit more on what's happening in the end times as far as like what's happening in Israel. Let's take a look at Psalm 2. Throughout the Old Testament, there are many, many verses that talk of the end times and prophesy about what's going to happen in the future. Psalm 2, verses 7 through 9. Actually, let's read the whole chapter, starting with Chandra, working our way around one verse at a time.
Why do the nations plan rebellion? Why do people make their useless plots?
Did you say Psalm 2?
Yeah, Psalm 2,
Oh,
verse 2.
go ahead, go.
The kings of the earth set themselves, and rulers take counsel together against the Lord and against his anointed, saying,
Let us tear their fetters apart and cast away their cords from us.
He who sits in the heavens laughs, the Lord scoffs at them.
Then shall he speak unto them with it in his wrath, and vex them with his sore displeasure.
Yeah, I have set my king upon my holy hill of Zion.
I will declare the decree the Lord has said unto me, Thou art my son, this day have I begotten thee.
Ask and I will give you all the nations. The whole earth will be yours.
where you at?
Verse 9.
Thou shalt break them with an end of iron. Shalt thou dash them in pieces like the potter's vessel.
Now therefore, O kings, show discernment.
Oh, Nancy, were you going to read?
For what?
Verse 10.
Now therefore, O kings, show discernment. Take warning, O judges of the earth.
Worship the Lord with reverence and rejoice with trembling.
Kiss the Son, lest he be angry, and ye perish from the way, when his wrath was kindled. but a little. Blessed are all they that put their trust in him.
So going back to verse 2, the kings of the earth set themselves and the rulers take counsel together. They get together and they do all this planning and they set alignments and they decide who they're going to be against. And they think they have all the power, like they have the control, but who really has the control? God. And I think that's why it says he sitteth in the heaven and laughs, because he's like laughing at them, like, you have no control over this. You think you do, but you really don't. It's so easy for us to get focused on what's happening in the world. It's important to keep in mind the end goal and what's going to happen in the future, and not put too much stock in what the government might be doing. We're not really supposed to be involved in the government, but we should be involved in knowing about the government. Are there any other comments that you would like to make about this chapter?
I like the next verse too, when it refers to that, and he will speak to them in his anger and terrify them in his fury. Because it'll be at that point when world leaders realize we have no control,
Right.
or they have no control.
They have no control. That's absolutely right. As we were reading that, I was thinking of Daniel and the statue and the dream. To me, that's one of the most powerful pieces of prophecy, because it's so specific on what the different governments are going to be. And to me, it's like amazing, like how they were able to get all that written down and how all of that took place. So let's take a look at that, because it does talk about what happens at the end. And that is in Daniel 2, I believe. Daniel 2 or 9. I can never remember which one. You can help me out here. Oh, here it is. Daniel 2. It might just start right at the beginning of the chapter.
Verse 24 is where the dream is recited and interpreted.
Oh, there we go. Yeah, that let's start right there. And I can't remember where we left off, but let's go from 24 and just continue to read for a while. Oh, wait, yeah.
Therefore Daniel went in until
Arioch.
Arioch, whom the king had ordained to destroy the wise men of Babylon. He went and said thus unto him, destroy not the wise men of Babylon, bring me in before the king, and I will show unto the king the interpretation.
Go ahead, Lowell. 25.
Then Arioch brought in Daniel before the king in haste, and said thus unto him, I have found a man of the captives of Judah, that will make known unto the king of the interpretation.
The king said to Daniel, whose name was Belteshazzar, are you able to make known to me the dream which I have seen and its interpretation?
Daniel answered before the king and said, as for the mystery about which the king has inquired, neither wise men, conjurers, magicians, nor diviners are able to declare it to the king.
There is a God in heaven that revealeth secrets, and maketh known to the king Belteshazzar what shall be in the latter days. Thy dream and thy visions of thy head upon thy bed are these.
As for these, O king, thy thoughts change not thy mind upon thy bed, what should come to make it known thee, what shall come to pass.
But as for me, the secret is not revealed to me for any wisdom that I have more than anybody, but for those things that shall make known the interpretation to the king, and that thou might know the thoughts of my heart.
So the first thing I want to point out here is he is not taking credit at all for this. He's giving God all of the credit because he knows that's where it's coming from. So that's important to note. Let's move on to verse 31.
Thou, king, sawest, and behold, a great image. This great image, whose brightness was excellent, stood before thee, and the form thereof was terrible.
The head of that statue was made of the fine gold, its breast and its arms of silver, its belly and its thighs of bronze.
legs of iron, its feet partly of iron and partly of clay.
Thus sawest till that a stone was cut out without hands, which smote the image upon his feet that were of iron and clay, and brake them to pieces.
Then was the iron, the clay, the brass, the silver, and the gold broken into pieces together, and became like the stone of rolling wood, and the purpose was found. And the stone that smote the image became great a mountain and filled the whole earth.
This is the dream, and we will tell the interpretation thereof before the king.
Okay, so we're not gonna go through the entire interpretation, but going back to verse 33, the legs of iron and feet, part of iron and part of clay, that's where we're at right now with the world governments. There's not just one that, there are some that are stronger, some governments that are stronger than others, but it's not like in the previous areas where the head was fine gold, the breast and arms were of silver. It was like one big government that was really ruling the world. Who was the stone that was cut out without hands?
Jesus, well, it's the kingdom.
Well, yeah, Jesus coming to break apart all of the world governments.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to point that out, and we can actually look at verse 40. Let's go to 41 and read through 45.
And whereas thou hast sawest the feet and toes, part of potter's clay and part of iron, the kingdom shall be divided, but there shall be in it of the strength of the iron. For as much as thou sawest the iron mixed with miry clay.
That's the toes of the, go ahead, whoever's next.
He has the toes of the feet partly of iron and partly of iron. So some of the kingdom will be strong and part of it will be brittle.
And whereas thou sawest iron mixed with
Myri?
miry clay, they shall mingle themselves with the seed of men, and they shall not cleave one to another, even as iron is not mixed with clay.
And in the days of these kings shall the God of heaven serve the kingdom, which shall never be destroyed, and the kingdom shall not be left to other people, but it shall break in pieces and consume all of the kingdom, and it shall stand forever.
For as much as thou sawest that the stone was cut out of the mouth without hands, and that it brake in pieces the iron, the brass, the clay, the silver, and the gold, the great God hath made known to the king what shall come to pass hereafter, and the dream is certain, and the interpretation thereof sure.
Okay. So that just talks about a little bit more in detail about the legs and the feet and how and the kingdom as well. We are getting down to the end of Sunday school, so I would like to go to Joel 3. Joel 3 and verses 1 and 2. Joel, Amos. So Hosea, Joel, Amos. I always have to think of that when I'm looking for it. Joel 3 verses 1 and 2. For behold, in those days and in that time, when I shall bring again the captivity of Judah and Jerusalem, I will also gather all nations and will bring them down into the valley of Jehoshaphat, and will plead with them there for my people and for my heritage Israel, whom they have scattered among the nations and parted my land. And so that began back in 1948 when Israel became a nation again. A lot of Jewish people came back to their homeland. The preparation for war and wars will lead to regular conflicts that culminate in all nations involved, like Zechariah 12 and 14, which also describe Jesus coming. Israel's actions might be the spark to bring the nations against Israel collectively. But in Ezekiel 38, nations are not yet allied with Russia yet. So there are some alignments that need to still shift before Armageddon can happen. Are there any other comments for
Ezekiel what?
Ezekiel 38? And those notes were from Russell. So I'm sure a lot of them out west are really delving into looking at the different alignments, and I remember doing that as a child. It was really interesting to me how the different governments were depicted by different animals in the Bible, and what they were used to be called and what they're called now. And I wish I remembered all that. It's just it's a lot.
In my Bible.
It's a lot
'Cause, yeah.
to take in and to remember. Are there any other questions? So keep watching.
This reminds me of a verse, I think it was in Revelation, but I don't remember. It was talking about how the knowledge of those on earth would excel rapidly, and if you think about it, 50 years ago, we weren't capable of the medicine we have now, or, you know, the technology we have now. It's crazy that we have so many things in space that help, you know, predict the weather and, you know, just contribute to our everyday lives that we don't even realize yet.
Right. The last 30 years has been an explosion of information
Right.
and knowledge with the internet. You can look anything up now. It may or may not be accurate, but it's there. And the wealth of knowledge that is out there is kind of scary at times.
Especially with the development of AI too. We're not even sure what the capabilities of that is yet.
Yes.
But anyway.
Yeah.
I'd like to find that verse at some point. I don't know where it's at.
What's it, what are the
It refers to how,
Oh, the explosion of knowledge.
just how it grows rapidly,
Yeah.
fast.
that the people run to control? Is it in that?
I think the word knowledge is in there. Knowledge or wisdom. I think it's knowledge. If only we had a way to look that up on some device. Somebody Google it.
I would, but I'm recording.
Good morning.
Someone to put it on.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, Erica is looking up on the magic box.
Just 21%.
What is it?
What is 21%?
Of course.
Revelation?
We were wiping away. That's the
As Erica's looking that up, we've been talking about what's happening in Israel and how eventually all nations are going to go against Israel, and that's going to bring about the end times and Jesus' return. And we just started talking about the knowledge in the past 30 years and how the increase of knowledge with the internet and all of that is one of the signs of the times.
Oh, try looking up later. We don't have
Yeah,
to-
we can look it up later.
I'm not sure it's in Revelation.
Yeah, it could be in Daniel.
It's very specific.
We'll look up that verse, and if it's not it, we can move on.
But thou, O Daniel, shut up the words in the seal of the book, even to the end of, even to the time of the end, many shall run to and fro, and knowledge shall be increased.
There we go, knowledge will increase, yes.
Where's that found?
Daniel,
But I like right before that, it says people run to and fro, so it's like a vision of chaos.
Chaos, for sure.
seems
But-
like it now, yeah.
It does feel like chaos out in the world sometimes. You need to just stop and smell the roses sometimes.